probably get cracking here, and I'm sure that there'll be a couple of stragglers who'll be landing in here as we go. Especially Fergal McGunwick, it's Stuart where Mayor Glórtha Ciotacha, a Sagrada Pobble agus Oiga, Glórtha Ciotacha, I think Grackdal and Stride the Count in the show, Glórtha Ciotacha, is Sardis Cusper listing Stride the Count in the show, and a Spasana, Fiscal Shiha, a Kohu, in her Federation Pobble Chat the Kila, it's a big play, it's a Gisbrat Soplana. Bagnish for Hunkin. So I'm Fergal McGunwick, I work for Glórtha Ciotacha, and we're organising the talk series here, Upward Voices. And I suppose the aim of that is to create spaces where people can debate and discuss our past, our present, and our future. And this is our 5th talk to date, and we're honoured that we're actually going to be having this event 1 year to the day that Niall Murphy here, who's our guest this evening, was brought in the ICU with COVID, and from that time he has recovered, and he has hit 120 mile an hour again in his work and his activism. So we're greatly honoured to have him here this evening. Our Caherlack and Sean Act is Andree Murphy. Andree Murphy is a Deputy Director at Relatives for Justice. She is also a columnist with the Town News, and is very well known in the community here as a political commentator as well. So I'm going to hand us over to Andree. The interview will last for 45 minutes or so, and then we will open it up for Q&A in the chat room. And Gana Hilly Williams going to hand you over to Andree Murphy. Gurmila Magan, Andree.
Gurmila Magan, Fergal, and Fáilte Riv Gachduine. It's my honour to be asked to do this with a friend and a colleague with Niall. And that it is a special evening because I know what anniversaries are like. I'm really grateful to be given this opportunity. So, Gurmila Magan. I suppose I could start off by reading out the list of Niall's achievements and everything he's been involved in, a list of his writings, who he has spoken to from Geneva to New York, the number of organisations he even runs and is part of, but we've only got 45 minutes, I can't. But what I'm hoping is that during our conversation that we'll have over the next little while, you have tuned in because you know something about him, but that we'll all get to know Niall a little bit better and get to understand the issues that motivate him so strongly a little bit more by the end of it. So what I'm going to do, Niall, Fáilte wrote, is start at the very, very beginning and tell us a little bit about young Niall. Tell us a bit about your parents. Your daddy's very well known, but also where you grew up and where you went to school.
Well, just sort of Tossimwood game mo buchas ar orta agus ar Fergal agus an common Glórtha Ciotacha ag tashbans doing an chance shaw an bhléin agus má héal a phléileh. Very much obliged to yourself, Andree, for good friends as we are, but it's not easy to conduct an interview like this. And also many thanks to Fergal and the staff at Glórtha Ciotacha for facilitating this series of talks. Glórtha Ciotacha's role in the community is something that inspires me and inspires some of the organisations that I'm involved in Glengormley, and that's, I suppose, where it all starts for me. Rugby agus Tugime in Glengormley. I was born and bred in Glengormley. My parents are both from Armagh. My father's from Blackwater Town, just on the border of the Moy, right at the interface with Tyrone, and it is an interface. The 2003 All-Ireland final was one of the tensest hours of my life, sitting beside it, watching Tyrone dethrone Armagh for the Sam Maguire. But my mother's from the Grange, which is a neighbouring club just outside Armagh City. Blundell's Grange is where she was born and reared. They met themselves as teenagers at the crossroads between Blackwater Town and the Grange, and we're going out since. My mother always chastises my dad that she had the opportunity to skedaddle early on and she didn't, and now they're stuck so many years later. But all my childhood memories are obviously in Glengormley, going to a local primary school here, and playing hurling and football for our club, St Enda's. But my memory of the 80s, as much as I went to watch Antrim matches at Corrigan and Casement, I'd have been on the road watching Armagh National League games all through the 80s. I could name you that Armagh team of the 80s. Heroes as they were, they didn't win too much. Not dissimilar to Antrim footballers, but the 80s sort of crescendoed at 1989, and the Antrim senior hurlers get to Croke Park, and that was an inspiring, crazy episode that really does let you know that, you know, smaller, less successful, less imbued with a sense of success teams their dreams can come true, and you can get the All-Ireland finals. And in terms of our club, you know, I never thought St Enda's would be in an All-Ireland final or be Ulster champions, but last year, over the last 2 years, the footballers got to the intermediate All-Ireland final, beat Glórtha in the county intermediate final, and I would happily say that Glórtha gave them the hardest match until the All-Ireland final. The sportsmanship, the camaraderie that the Gort players gave our lads going off the pitch, something as a club we'll never forget. And that same sense of sporting credibility and communitarianism that Glórtha and Glórtha represent is, as I say, something that has inspired our club. I can remember when the concept of us establishing an Irish medium primary school on the site of our club was in its preliminary thoughts. We looked to Glórtha and Glórtha as a club and community as to how it's done. And I can remember Fergal and Kieran McGillivain and Padraig McCathwell. Literally, I can almost recall the night. It was lashing rain. Padraig was a drowned rat and never a soaked in my life. But just going around doors, knocking the doors of the local community, just to inquire, was there an interest? Was there a need for Irish medium education? And we were a small committee. Myself, Kieran McCavanagh, Dara Woods, who's a teacher at Glórtha Ciotacha, and some other parents, all of our partners. We weren't married at that stage, none of us had kids. So we were young people stepping out into, you know, a role of community activism, trying to service your community, enhance the facilities, and build a community spirit. And when we were doing that, we got a hand up from the Turf Lawns community. They had walked the path, showed us how to do it, and their friendship and solidarity is something that I'll benefit from, and our community will benefit from forevermore.
That's really lovely, and it really speaks to Belfast. You know, yeah. that there's something in Belfast, particularly around Belfast Gaels, that is very, very special, because I think of the history of struggle, the history of trying to find a place against a system that really didn't want you. And I think that there's something very special, particularly around, you know, the turn of the millennium and, you know, the years just preceding it and after it. That's very unique. But going back to yourself and you grown up, would you have said during your years growing up, you've mentioned St Enda's, playing hurling and football, would you have been more athletic or more academic?
You, as a teenage boy, you know, you do your school books, you do what's required, and you know, I didn't often think about it much more than discharging what was required. I wouldn't have said I had any mad academic intentions. Always like to do well. Right? I always like to, you know, try your best and be the best, but I would have much preferred to have been out playing football or you know, hitting the ball up against the wall with a hurling stick, getting the opportunity to go training and have matches. And in those days, you know, GA clubs might not have been as organised as they are now.
Yeah,
There might not have been the opportunities to train. In the 80s, our club, Niamh, had one pitch we've 3 now, and I'm involved with our senior hurlers, and it's still a struggle to get training space out of 3 pitches. In the old days, there was 1 pitch. There wasn't an awful lot of training, so you really lived for matches. And I can recall, you didn't know if it was a hurl match or a football match. You just knew there was a match every Saturday. The coach wasn't no WhatsApp groups in those days. You got a phone call to the house, be at the square in Glengormley, and you just turned up on it. If it was a hurl match, brilliant. If it was a football match, brilliant, because it was the same group of fellas. And
yeah,
it was as much to do with having the crack. We weren't that good. I'll let you in the big teams in those days probably were St. John's and Rossa, and still are. But it's all about sport. For me, is all about the friends that you make. And I'm always struck. Sandal McNaughton coached our senior hurlers 2 years ago, and he came off with a quote one time, and it's fantastic, and talks about county hurlers, and county hurling's great, and you get invited to dinner, dances and weddings, and you make good friends at the time that you're on a county panel, but it's your club mates that are the fellas that'll carry your coffin to its grave. And that's true. And it's everything, the sun, the moon, the stars begins, rises and settles at the club. And that's where a lot of our enjoyment now as parents and activism is based around. So I know that you and your children are heavily involved in St. John's, again, an exceptional club. But all of our clubs are exceptional, and the provision that we make for all of our children is exceptional. And I don't think if we began to pat ourselves on the back, and we rarely do, you would be finished in time enough for the credit that is due. The GAA as a social entity, as a communitarian organisation, supplants voluntarily so much responsibility that really is the state's role. But we do it because we want to enhance and improve and provide the best opportunities for the generations that come after us. And I can think of no more enjoyable use of my time than to be out coaching a young team, or out fundraising to build a new pitch or a new hall or a new school. Sure, what else would you be at?
And that why you picked St. Mary's over St. Malachy's for secondary school? That was it. That there was just more football and hurling there. Yeah.
My dad went to CBS in Armagh, so I think there was a thing there as well. And in those days, there was Barrack Street, so I went to Barrack Street for the first 3 years, and Barrack Street only really was 2 stops beyond St. Malachy's from the Antrim Road, so it wasn't the big journey that it is nowadays for kids from North Belfast. To be 11 years old to go all the way to Glen Road is a long run. There's no doubt about it. But in those days, it was just an extra 2 bus stops, and then you were at Barrack Street, and I loved every minute of it. I loved every minute of St. Mary's. St. Mary's in those days, it was a Christian Brothers school. I know there's no brothers now, but the brothers really reinforced just that spirit in the yell, the Irish Gaelic ethos, not only through games but through language. Language provision was very, very strong in St. Mary's, and all my summers growing up from St. Mary's, we went to the Glórtha in Loughnmuir, and then from 4th year on in Ranafast, and the enjoyment and the crack that you have in the Glórtha is something that I think in a young, impressionable teenager enhances their enjoyment and love for the language. And it's not a love that you can have for a simple academic topic or subject at school, but the Gaeltacht really brings the language to life. And again, it's the social nature of it. Much like sport, it's the relationships and the friendships and the crack that you have that really makes that umbilical link with the language, and it's something that I think is being lost in the pandemic at the minute.
Yes.
My own son was just finished first year, and we had the deposit paid for him to go off to Lough, and he's missing it. And I have another son this year in first year, and he's going to miss it, and the older boy's going to miss what should be his second year. And I just think back to, you know, my first 2 summers in the Glórtha, and just the crack and hilarity and release. You know, no parent about, and
they lasted forever.
Yeah, and they are memories that last forever. And you know, you develop an affinity and a love for Donegal. I've returned every year to Donegal as a result of the enjoyment that you have as a teenager. And they're missing out. It's sad, but
it is. It is, and it must have seemed like such a world away from Glengormley in the 80s.
Oh yeah, you know, everything was a world away.
Yeah.
You know, even the bus was like 5 or 6 hours. The roads, there was, you know, the road to Derry today isn't great, but it was much worse then. Yes, much less the road from Derry Letterkenny, or the road from Letterkenny to Lough. You know, it was an arduous drive, but again, you have the crack on the bus, and just that. It's just, you know, being enveloped by nature, and you know, looking up at Errigal or the Glen at Dunlewy, or you know, the day trips to the beach. You know, all of that, and just the beautiful natural surroundings of, you know, Ranafast or Lough. I often, sometimes you recall, you don't remember the bad bits, and yes, I'm sure it was midges all the time, and rain, and you were in class quite a bit. You know, it always struck me when you were every year. There's a lot of class here, but just all of that melts away when you're having the crack and the banter.
And there's something about just being allowed to be Irish without it being a big deal as well, unlike in Glengormley.
Yeah. There you know, something that gives me such great pride in Glengormley now is just so many kids walking around with their St. Enda's gear, their black and amber. Delighted that Laker Lockley adopted our colours, and East Belfast Gales as well. But in Glengormley, when I was growing up, we had no club gear.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, club gear wasn't really a big thing. You know, O'Neill's only really got into it sort of this century, I suppose. But in the 80s, I can remember my dad buying me a black and amber tracksuit just out of the athletic stores, and I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I had a club coloured tracksuit, but there was no gear, and if there was, you wouldn't have worn it, because Glengormley in those days was a bigoted, sectarian, divided parish, and we knew our community was very much a minority community, and we knew that we weren't welcome. Our club was burnt down, I think, 13 times in the 1980s. My dad was chairman 1979 to 1981, and I can recall phone calls to the house, police coming to the house, and him being asked to go up and, you know, open the gates, sir. And my dad goes, "Why? We think there's a bomb head." And I goes, "Well, you go and open it then." No, I'm not. Or the UDR coming up, and I remember one time the UDR come up and chopped down the football posts, which are expensive. It's still expensive today. Or putting glass in the pitch, and that harassment really took a wicked, evil turn in the 90s, and we had several members murdered in the 90s. Our club president, Sean Fox, 72 years old, was murdered in his home in October 1983. I remember my dad getting a phone call to the house, just getting the news. It was just horrendous, seeing the fear in his eyes. And those were phone calls that many houses received in those days, and many GA clubs endured loss. It wasn't something specific to us. 1987, our senior football manager, 5th of December 1997, our senior football manager was shot dead at the club gate. Jerry Devlin. It was the last night of the old clubhouse just before we moved up to where we are currently, and you know, that had a deep effect on me, because I had played senior football when I was 18 with Jerry, and I got a bad knee injury, and he had a bad knee injury, and he sort of took out took a special interest in, rehab wasn't a big thing in those days, but he had got himself back from a bad injury and was always telling me how to build it up and what to do and giving you confidence that you could get back. And I was, what age was 1987? I was maybe 19 or 20. So it's a formative event in your life background. 2001, there was a young boy, Gavin Brett, was shot dead at the bottom of the lane at the Hightown Road, just a random drive-by murder. Gavin was actually a Protestant guy who lived in the area. In 2002, Jared Lawler was shot dead. He was the last Catholic to be murdered as a result of the conflict by loyalists. Last Catholic to be shot dead. And I'll never forget, I was out with friends that night and on the Anderson's times. I grew up with a lot of friends in Aldi Town. I haven't went to St Mary's. So I was out with friends that night, and my phone ran out of charge or something, but when I charged the phone up the next day, there was a message from my dad saying, basically, I knew he was phoning around, are all my sons alive? Because he had heard that there was somebody shot dead, a Catholic was shot dead in Glengormley. And that's not that long ago. It was investigated by the PSNI. I'm a solicitor, as you know, Andree, and I have the privilege to represent both the Devlin and the Lawler families to investigate or to hold to account the failure to investigate their murders. And in all the bombings and shootings and murders at our club, no one has ever been charged. No one has ever been brought to court. No one has ever been convicted. So when there is that ambivalence towards a community, there is a sense of an intense sense of community in amongst those who have endured it, and I know that is something that's replicated right across the north. We both have worked with families in East Tyrone, and the bond that I see in communities in East Tyrone is something that I recognise as a lived experience in Glengormley.
So for you, with all of that experience behind you, and whenever you do your A levels, was it always going to be law? Did you know that it was going to be law that you were going into?
No, not at all. Just sort of meandered through. I would like to say I was always to be a lawyer, but I didn't, to be honest. I had applied to do Irish and media studies at Coleraine. My sister had gone to Coleraine, and I got better A levels. To be honest, I got better A levels than I was expecting, and I had applied for law on the off chance that I had a generous marker, and I decided just to go to Queen's to do law. I was the only guy in St Mary's that year who was going to do law, so I was sort of, on my own. I thought I'll give it 1 year and see how it goes. But then again, the crack and the spirit that you have at university, I wasn't in law class very often, but threw myself into the hurling club, loads of lifelong friends made there, and just, enjoyed the crack. You could see the benefit of doing law as I began to do it. And something that you detect with the benefit of hindsight. Young ones get very wrapped up and fearful about their futures.
Yeah.
When they're at university and you get CVs from kids in first year and they're wanting to spend all their summers at doing work experience. And I would much prefer, young ones to enjoy the liberty that they have and, go to America or go away, and enjoy the free time that university affords you, because once you start working, it's gone forever. And I didn't apply for any type of work experience or anything until I'd finished my exams in third year. And whereas I sent out 40 CVs, I only got one job offer, and that was in Madden and Finucane.
That's mad. That is mad.
Yeah. And
it ends up being a vocation after that.
Yeah, and just, did the job interview, and the guy that was interviewing me said, you can start tomorrow, or you can start, when's your last exam? And I said, the 2nd of June. And he goes, would you start on the 3rd of June? And I thought, I don't want to, like, but I just said yes. And then he said, yeah, okay, we can start on the 3rd of June. And I did. And that was it. And that's when it became a vocation. So when I started in Madden Fnugan, and Madden Fnugan is very much like my own practice now, KRW law, you are given responsibility. You don't make tea for anybody. You're given a file, you're sent to court, and just do it. You know, not have a Johnny, don't talk about it, do it. There's a file, off you go, represent that person. And it's the best way to learn, it's the only way to learn. And it's not really sink or swim. There's always, you know, there's always somebody supervising you to make sure that you don't sink. But immediately getting involved and working and being exposed and attending court cases, I knew this is it. This is what I want to do, and I've been doing it since.
And you're very well known for, I suppose, as the formidable defence lawyer, you know, those big show trials, I suppose you'd near call them, that were at the beginning of the millennium, and also your legacy work. They're two very different types of law.
Absolutely, yeah.
And which is the one, or is there a difference between what gets you up in the morning, which one drives you?
They're both completely distinct areas of law. They're you know, completely different, but they both can motivate you to get out of bed. You know, if you get a sense that your client in a criminal case is being prosecuted unfairly, or that it's a political persecution,
yes,
as has happened,
yes,
and does continue to happen, well then that's something that aggravates your own sense of right and wrong. And even there's, you know, I think the statistics are something, 93 people who are prosecuted or plead guilty or are found guilty. And I started, my early part of my practice was based in Downpatrick. And, you know, very often you're working with just troubled people, and they deserve representation and agency and a voice. And they're not just, they're not represented by the crime that they've been prosecuted for. And there is a background to their lives that merits articulation before a court. And, you know, our courts are sensitive and receptive. And I have to say, I enjoyed that. I remember representing a young lad. He ended up taking his own life, but was, I suppose he could be described as a recidivist, but would be stealing sandwiches or to feed himself. But he would have stole cars as well. And I asked him one time, you know, what are you playing at, you know? And he said something that always struck me. He says, well, why does that person get to have a nice car? Why because I had no opportunity do I not get a nice car? Now, he knows that what he was doing wrong, but it sort of summed up the inequality in society. And I'm not saying that, I'm absolutely not saying that he had any right, and nor did he, but, you know, society is unequal and not everybody has the same opportunities in life. And I always had a sympathy for people that may have grown up in the most awful of domestic backgrounds, and, you know, what informs perhaps the background of somebody like that manifests itself in some of the offences for which they are prosecuted, and the court deal with them.
And I think that there's always so much talk about how we're a post-conflict society and suffer from very high rates of mental ill health and all of those issues, but those connections are never made to who's appearing in court and who's disadvantaged at any point. And then you see legal aid attacked or whatever, and those people who are already disadvantaged become further disadvantaged.
Yeah. And legal aid, of course, is part of the welfare state. You know, the statute which incepted legal aid was set up by the Labour government after World War II, at the same time as the NHS and the welfare state, because that government understood that there required to be access to justice, and that's what legal aid affords. If I wanted to make money or at law, you know, no lawyer would be working for legal aid rates. You know, you would go a commercial route, and you know, there's big American companies and it pays fantastic. But if that gets you out of bed, fair play to you. You know, reading doc review, as they call it, for an international shipping dispute, 45 hours a week wouldn't get me out of bed. But you know, fair play to them. I really enjoy meeting people. I enjoy the, you know, criminal courts are adversarial, so you do have to show your teeth now and again. But I enjoy helping people, and there's no greater calling than to be tasked to advocate on somebody's behalf when their liberty's at stake. You know, the deprivation of liberty is the most oppressive, restrictive thing that the state can do. And I would be loath that be exercised in any other circumstance than that which is merited. So I enjoy representing people. I enjoy everybody having the opportunity of access to justice, and I enjoy ensuring that the police are held to account. You know, good criminal defence representation ensures honest police work of integrity, and surely as a society that's what everyone aspires to.
Absolutely. And linked to that then is your work on legacy, and you're probably very well known in the community for the legacy work. Can you remember the first legacy case landing on your desk?
Well, yes, I can. It was Lough Island. And really the story of how I ended up representing those families, and that's been one of the great privileges of my life, representing those families. It has a good narrative in terms of the law as well. Not that I want to give a law lecture, but the reason that there is the opportunity to litigate in respect of legacy litigation, as it's called, is because of a series of cases that were taken in the 1990s by lawyers on whose shoulders I now stand, Peter Madden, Pat Finucane, and others. And our own dear friend Clara Riley, the Honorary Chair of Relatives for Justice. And, you know, the work that they did, your own Mark as well, the work that they undertook, the strategic vision that they had for strategic litigation, and to take cases, because there was no access to justice in the domestic High Court, Belfast, cases were taken to Strasbourg in the European Court of Human Rights, litigating under Article 2, the right to life. And as a result of 6 cases that were judgmented by Strasbourg from 2000 to 2004, they're collectively called as the McCurr group of cases, but they involved the Finucane case and the Shanahan case, and obviously the shoot to kill cases. And the cumulative outworking of those 6 cases was that the state was then obliged to provide a domestic remedy for Article 2 abuses where the state was involved in the taking of a life, be that through collusion or direct in uniform murder, or their failure to investigate a murder in which there was an allegation against the state, and that brought in the concept of collusion. And in 1995, when RFJ was set up, collusion was an illusion. It was Republican propaganda. It was a lie. The mainstream media told us. But we now know, with the benefit of history, hindsight, access to justice, that that was the lie. And that collusion was a systemic state policy. And as a result of the McCurr group of cases, the state was obliged to provide a mechanism so that next of kin could interface with the criminal justice system. And as a result, we had the Police Ombudsman Historic Directorate. And as a result, we have legacy inquests. And there was an attempt at the HET, which is now the PSNI LIB. And it's a reason why there is a Stormont House agreement that will provide for a historical investigations unit. But all of that can be derived back to the strategic vision of lawyers in the 90s. So I can recall being asked to do a presentation on the 10th of January 2005 at the Millbrook Lodge Hotel in outside Ballyhinch on the cumulative outworking of the McCurr group of cases. The last judgment was September 2004. And it took a while to read, understand, digest, for the British state to respond. But by the new year of 2005, lawyers understood, people have cases here. People have a right to access to justice. And I was approached that was a town hall type meeting. And I was approached at that meeting by Claire Rogan and Emma Rogan, who's Emma's father, Adrian, Claire's husband, was murdered in Loughlin Island. And the instructions were as simple as, we just don't know. There was no investigation. We were told no stone would be left unturned, but the police haven't been near us since. Emma at that time had just turned 18. She's now a married mother and an MLA sitting on the Justice Committee. But at that time, and I'll never forget, we did the press conference in June 2006, probably 18 months after it. Emma was just a young woman burning with a sense of injustice. And now, whatever the law says, you sort that out, but I'm getting answers. And that was an experience that was replicated dozens of times. And families do take leadership from the Finucane family. So when the Finucane family make an advance, all families make an advance. When Bloody Sunday Tribunal was making such landmark societal changes in terms of how we comprehend state violence, everybody who lost a loved one as a result of state violence benefited. When you asked me about legacy, one of the first cases I worked on in Madden Finucane was Bloody Sunday. It was all hands on deck. We were up taking statements just from the people at Derry. They would come into the office, and you might have somebody coming in and telling you, I've seen 5 murders and I haven't spoken about it since. I'm just breaking down in front of you. And,
yeah, absolutely.
You're trying to take a statement, and it was traumatic, yet access to justice was cathartic for a city. For a city to be unburdened by the decades of lies perpetrated upon them by one of the most significant imperial powers in world history, that British government, was revelatory for not just a community, but a society and a city. And that is being replicated in smaller pools right across all communities in the north. And it really is empowering. And it's one of my most honoured privileges to have been asked to sit on the board of Relatives for Justice, because the work that RFGA do on a holistic basis, it's not just about the law. And it's access to a court can be crude and black and white and dispassionate. I know that family might go home that night and cry themselves to sleep. I know that because I've been told that. Our good friend Jim Clinton, as strong and tough a man as he is, will tell you that when discussing his wife's case, he's mush that night and takes days to get back to himself. And the work that RFGA do to provide holistic support for the whole person is so crucial, and is so often overlooked, that there is the psychological support mechanisms to assist and heal the entirety of what the person has gone through. And
that's because of who founds it, because you look at it's 92, all of these families who are affected by direct state violence and collusion come together in Emma Groves' house, and they start strategizing. It was actually in Emma's house that the Article 2 legal strategy is devised, with people like Emma Groves, Claire O'Reilly, who are just ordinary women who've had extraordinary experience, but with extraordinary strength, alongside the Seamus Tracy's, Peter Madden's, Paddy Kelly's. And it's in that living room that they come up with this historic strategy that changes history. It doesn't just change legal precedent here, it changes it right across Europe, and it's recognised in international doctrine all over the place. And I think that speaks to the role of NGOs complementing what you do, because I see it all the time, the essential part of what you do complemented by the work of an NGO. That's how community heals, and how they ensure that truth does set you free, and no one part works without the other.
Exactly. It's been revelatory and actually historic, because history can now be corrected by fact.
Exactly.
The lies that perpetrated the narrative for all those years through unmitigated access to the mainstream media are now being retrospectively corrected. And I think that the most egregious outworking of all of that is those that died without access to justice, without truth recovery. Yesterday was International Day for Truth Recovery, as you know, and so many people went to such unhappy graves, burdened with the lie that was visited upon them after the state had taken their loved one.
Yes.
And that narrative is now being corrected by fact.
Yes.
I think is so empowering to correct history. And we're not so far removed from that history not to be able to correct it. And, you know, history is important. It informs where we're at now, projects where we're going to in the future. I'm sure we'll get on to discuss the future. But, you know, even looking at the decade of centenaries, as they call it, you know, I've spent any moment of spare time I get reading 16 Lives or, you know, material to do with Civil War, you know, difficult times. But the state at that time burnt it, closed it, don't talk about it, don't mention the war. Whereas now we're in a position that we can correct it, not in time for many poor people, but in time, hopefully, for many of the next generation.
And does all of that inform your work on Ireland's future?
Yes, you know, of course, because no one person is indivisible from their past or their present. And, you know, my view of the future is that when you do look, you know, I'm really enjoying listening to and reading the stuff of David McWilliams at present. And because he has an absolutely politically neutral perspective, it's even more stark when you hear his D4 accent that partition has been an economic sin for us. You know, we're living with, you know, the legacy of conflict. We're also living with a legacy of partition. Belfast in 1911 was a bigger city than Dublin. You know, people wouldn't believe that if you told them it now. Dublin's 4 times the size of Belfast now. The economic output of Belfast was 3 times as big as Dublin. This is David McWilliams facts. 80% of the industrial output on the island was in Belfast. Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilding industries, the aircraft making industries, cigarettes, and those industries, linen making industry, have effectively died, and Belfast is all the poorer for it. And the lie of the subvention myth, this mysterious £10 billion a year, there was me and you're in trouble because we're clashing with the launch of an Ireland's future economic document. But the myth of subvention that this northern state, this state founded on a sectarian headcount, can't stand up for itself. It can. It was economically deprived and its surplus taken from us by the imperial force of the 20th century. That should have been reinvested in Ireland for the benefit of the people of Ireland, and it's not too late. And I passionately believe that Ireland's future is best served by a new imagination, a new state, a new economic vision that will benefit all citizens. And, you know, the sooner that we can shed ourselves of this hard shell of nationalism and unionism and just really understand that all of our best opportunities lie when all of our industrial and economic output is going back and reinvested for us. You know, a 7 million citizen island state, pains me to say it, English speaking, or the only English speaking nation in the European Union, you know, the gateway to America. The opportunities are limitless. And in the report that Ireland's Future has launched tonight, and I would implore everybody to read it. It's very comprehensible. It's only 20 pages, but the economic whirlwind that can be unleashed for all of our benefit will stand to improve the lives of everybody. You know, the NHS, I benefited, saved my life this day last year. I was placed in an induced coma, had a ventilator put down my throat. I was in a coma for 17 days. On the 30th of March, the consultant phoned my wife to say I might not make it through the night. You know, so I understand the value of healthcare, but I have been almost like a lightning rod for consultants who are terrified to speak out loud on this, who will say the NHS doesn't work. The NHS has been mythologized by the Tory government. Stand and clap at your front door, wear a badge. See that badge? It's another thing that aggravates me. Nurses were being asked to pay for that badge.
I never knew that.
£9 was deducted from their wage for that badge. See, when I was told that, I couldn't comprehend it. The nurses are the superheroes. The NHS structurally isn't, and there is an opportunity to reimagine a better health service on this island for everybody. The hospital, the NHS that operates in the 6 counties isn't the same NHS that operates in England or Wales. Our waiting lists are far longer than would be tolerated in England and Wales, and that's through underinvestment. That Hancock and the Tory government haven't spent billions on their mates, enriching them through track and trace, to then insult the superhero nurses and doctors and consultants with 1% pay rise. These are nurses that stood in the dark, and to my shame, because I'd never been in hospital, I didn't understand. They were striking not for a pay rise, but for pay parity. They were striking for safe staffing levels, standing in the cold, depriving themselves of a day's wage so that the patients would be safe, not for pay rises. And that was lost in the media reporting of all this. And it really, really aggravates me, having gone through what I went through and benefited from the first waking up from a coma and not knowing where you are. You're full of drugs, your head's not right, you're fearful, you don't know what your family's going through, you can't see anybody, and having a nurse come up and hold your hand. It's the most peaceful, reassuring thing that any human being will ever experience. Hopefully most people don't. But for those people to be insulted in the way that they have been, having put their lives on the line for us, to offer them 1% is offensive, and that agitates me. It makes me very, very angry.
No, and I mean, I can sort of relate to what you're saying, absolutely. And I think, the greatest scam that's been placed on us is light a candle in a window or clap at your door, because that prevents you from demanding change, from being affronted. And, I think that your own work at the front of Ireland's Future and articulating what would actually be a national health service, because there is no national health service here at all. We have a partitioned two broken systems on the island that have loads and loads of really, really good points, but the biggest point that they have is their people. the men and women who make up both services. And if you joined it together, you know, it could just be transformative for all of us, so that someone with rheumatology isn't sitting in being told, well, it'll be 6 years before you see a consultant, and most people with rheumatology won't see 6 years.
No,
you know,
no.
and it's a shame. Unbelievably, we're nearly an hour into this now. So what I'm going to say, ask you that, you know, it's obviously emotional talking about this night, but, you know, for you and your family, because it isn't only the person who's sick who goes through it, the family goes through it as well. What are you doing now? You know, you're a year later. It's obviously really reflective tonight, which you're sharing with us. Are you doing something special? Is there something that you do to recover from that?
Well, you know, listen. When I was in the coma, I was out of it, obviously. So I didn't actually go through anything. In terms of a lived experience, it was almost easy. You know, coming out of it wasn't too hard. It wasn't too easy, but you know, as a lived experience, it wasn't that bad because you are medically induced. But what my wife Mary went through, and what you know, she protected the kids from it. They knew I wasn't well, but they had no idea how unwell I was. But what she went through was just extraordinary. You know, she was getting one phone call a day, trying to compute and comprehend the medical message that she was receiving, whilst trying to run a house, looking after the kids. And then trying to, because she was the point of contact, she was getting the phone call, and then updating, you know, my parents and my siblings, and it was just so difficult on her personally, but so courageous as well, and just sort of trawling the family through it with such, you know, dignified comfort that the kids really didn't understand how bad it was. So I'll be eternally grateful to Mary for what she went through, and then, you know, the aftercare. When I got home, I wasn't fit for anything. Very, very weak. Couldn't walk to the top of the street, and just really had to be lifted and laid, probably for 2 months, certainly. You know, getting up out of bed, getting up out of a chair. So you know, she was almost, you know, like a personal nurse as well, looking after me and feeding me, and you know, that's what it's all about in sickness and in health. I didn't have it in my own life plan to be as sick as that. Nobody would. But that's what a good marriage is all about. That the other person's there, to stand in and to, you know, just act immediately, as she did. So what are we doing? Just we'll go for, you know, we're all locked down, so there's not much you can do. So
it's miserable.
So no, but we go out walking. So we're out, I got myself, or she got me a Fitbit there. So that's the new motivator. So we're going for a walk every night, and that's brilliant. And you know, you just try and take the positives out of everything. I've spent
Do you
more
think
time.
that idea, when, you know, something so dramatic happens, you know, you get this life's perspective, and
Absolutely.
it does put things in, you know, what you had been doing into a lot of perspective.
Big time, absolutely it does. And the time that I've been able to spend with, you know, the kids has just been life changing as well.
Right.
And you know, everybody works hard, but there's Evie now. Evie, come on, say hello.
All right, Evie.
Kedy na dahana sin. Sin ganzi ní bhéana nach bhfuil? Ní bhéana abu? Right, where's not? So, you know, just she's a comedian, aren't you? and just going out for walks and having the conversations about you have to be 12 before you're allowed a dog in the house.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that right, Eamon?
Eamon, we must have a talk later on.
So, it's just, trying to take the positives from it all, that, it's, you get to spend more time with the family and really do have a life perspective and a life work balance that I probably didn't, all right, Amor, that I probably didn't have, and it might have been too, spending too much time in work or on things, but I think I've got the balance right now.
Well, there's no better way to finish on that. I mean, we're obviously so grateful to have you with us. I can remember this night last year as well, and just how devastated we all were, waiting on, Mary would tell someone who'd tell us and whatever, and how devastated we were. And to have you back, to have you at the end of a call, at the end of a Zoom, putting up more of your posters in your office, we're delighted. It's just great, Niall, and this has been an absolute pleasure. The hour has gone past. So, Fergal, I'm going to hand back over to you. I don't even see any questions in the chat right now to even ask. We can't hear you.
Thanks very much, Andree. It was grand meal of now. I think that was excellent. And if anybody does want to come in and ask a question, we're more than welcome. I see, unfortunately, Kieran McCavan has showed us his camera, which means he's must be priming to say something, make a speech about when Anthem's coming back and when the GA is coming back or something uncontroversial. No, but as I say, it's been fantastic. And if everybody is happy enough, I want to thank Andree for doing a fantastic job, and Niall for what was a very emotional roller coaster as well. Not only talking about his GA club, but the stuff that happened last year. I remember I was just thinking when Andree was writing that, I was amongst the people who was asked to write an email to Niall. People were writing an email, and I remember as I tried to write the email, I wasn't able to do it because I felt like I was writing an insertion or something. I just couldn't do it, and I thought it was bad luck, and I didn't do it. And as Andree was saying, he came through, and it's been the all our benefit that he has come through. So, Gwar Míle Maige for fad as a in Sean Auckland. This is the 5th talk that we have had. We have an event in 2 weeks' time. We have a session with Bernadette McCalliskey, which we're no doubt will be fantastic, as it always is. And a few weeks after that, we have the great Fergus O'Hare, who has recently retired from his active work, and he's going to be doing a session with us as well. And I think the flavour of Niall here to come through in the discussion with Andree is that this whole programme has been about creating that space to think through how we can exist and how we can work together as a community to plan